Hello everyone, welcome back to Worlds Unwritten. My name is Jeriko. Today we're going to do a deep dive into the remastered Barbarian coming out in Player Core 2 for Pathfinder. This is our second class we're going to be diving into with all the new content coming out at the start of this August, and Barbarian is a class I'm really excited to see what they've done with. Barbarian, really solid class in the first place, in my personal opinion at least, very much focused as a damage dealing class with high damage output and more of a meat shield type tank, really high AC being the only class in the game, if I recall properly, to get 12 hit points per level, making them the easiest class to break 300 hit points with at maximum level. I think really frequently you're actually going to be hitting closer to 350, which is really, really strong. Now, they had some ways to balance this, but really, Barbarian is the epitome of high damage melee output for a party. And so, taking a look at what they've done with the remaster, we're going to go over what's changed, what's remained the same, as well as what I like and don't like about it, starting off with their main class features and their proficiency progression. So, the Barbarian works based off of their rage action. Prior to the remaster, it was a single action you could do as long as you weren't fatigued or already raging, and it would immediately give you some temporary hit points equal to your level plus your constitution modifier. It would increase your damage output on melee strikes as long as the weapon you or unarmed attack you were using was not agile. Also, it prevented you from using any action with the concentrate trait unless that action also had the rage trait. The biggest part of this was effectively saying you can't cast a spell while you're raging as a barbarian. You'd also take a -1, I believe, status penalty to AC if I recall properly, and the rage would last for 1 minute until you fall unconscious or until the encounter ends, whichever comes first. Rage was not something you could voluntarily stop, and once your rage ended, you would not be able to use it again for 1 minute. A really solid ability, the damage output will scale up and change its damage type based off of your instinct that you go with, but really wasn't a bad ability all around, a great thing to build a class around. And with the remaster, they've made it even better for a couple main reasons. The first one is actually the fact that you are not restricted. After a rage ends, you don't have to wait a minute before you can use it again. You can use it your next turn as long as you can perceive enemies. The difference is you won't be able to regain your temporary hit points from raging until a minute has passed since your last rage ended. So it's a little bit better. It's got some really, really nice adjustments that if you fall unconscious mid-combat or enemies all leave your senses for a brief period of time, your rage doesn't end and you're not stuck with without your main class feature for a whole minute. So I'm really, really happy they made that change, and I think it fits the class really nicely. Additionally, we've now gotten a free action called Quick Tempered. This is something that is done as soon as initiative is rolled, not even at the first action on your turn, and has the restriction that you cannot be encumbered or wearing heavy armor, and allows you to rage instantly. So it's a great way to just, beginning of combat, as soon as you roll initiative, you rage, and if your GM is letting you use reactions before you get to your first turn in combat, that is going to let you use a few specific abilities you can get down the road that have the rage trait and would otherwise be unusable before your first turn. Really happy with that change. Rage does have one more change that I think out of everyone I know, I may be the only person who's not particularly happy with, and that is the removal of the AC penalty from Rage. Rage now solely buffs your damage while making you unable to concentrate and giving you those temp HP when it is used. I understand why a lot of people like that. Take an AC penalty kinda sorta sucks, but I'm a big proponent and a huge fan of a sort of give and take mentality with your abilities, gaining really strong buffs and taking debuffs at the same time. Alchemist mutagens, the pre-remaster Oracle curses, and pre-remaster Rage were all abilities I really, really liked the theming behind specifically because of that. For me, I look at a barbarian and I think of a character who eschews defense to focus on a much more brutal offense. I want to see the Barbarian be sort of the height of what melee damage output can be, and I think them not focusing as heavily on their defense and that being referenced in them taking a penalty to their AC was actually really, really nice. Especially with the fact that they have the highest hit points in the game, I think having something to balance that out just fit. Now they're going to be made even better frontline tanks simply because they're still getting those 12 hit points, they're not taking that AC penalty, and as we'll see later, there are some feats that are going to make them even tankier if they choose to take them and go down that route. So, while I don't necessarily think it is a bad thing, and I think most people are going to be personally happy with that change to Rage, I'm disappointed by it. I think it was an unnecessary buff that it got, and it sort of removed a bit of the flavor from Barbarian's abilities. So, personally, if I were in charge, I would not have gotten rid of that, but I can understand why people are happy that's gotten rid of. So, all in all, changes to Rage, much better. Not being able to not use it when you've run out, and getting to use it as free action when combat starts, both are fantastic buffs. I'm not really sure Rage needed a buff, if any, but I don't think there's anything wrong with the buffs that it got. I think Barbarian is going to excel even further, especially at the start of combat with what it was already good at, and I'm excited for my encounter balance to go out the window when Barbarians continue to crit me. So, let's take a look at what else they've gotten. Furious Footfalls is a new 3rd level class feature you get that is the 4th level feat fast movement you could previously take for free and slightly better. Fast movement as a feat previously just gave you a 10-foot status bonus to speed while you were raging. Furious Footfalls gives you a flat 5-foot status bonus to your speed that will increase to a 10-foot bonus while you're raging. It's just the fast movement feat, you get it a level earlier, and it's even better by boosting your feat when you're not in combat, or when you're not raging. Fantastic ability. I'm not necessarily sure if it was necessary, but going back to my design philosophy that if it is necessary to the build, it should be part of their base kit, I do see most every Barbarian who has played at my tables taking that feat, so I don't think there's any issue just adding it into their base kit. It opens up the route for Barbarian to do much more with their feat choices. Your general feats, your skill feats, your ancestry feats, all of that remains the same. Most of your proficiencies and scaling are going to remain the same, and in fact, a lot of the feats are actually remaining the same. Barbarian, aside from those early buffs and some changes to some of the feats down the road, is very similar to what it was pre-remastered, just better in most cases. We'll get into those edge cases later. But there are a few changes to some of your proficiencies, and most of that comes from the fact that Rage no longer can't be used for a minute after it ends. Previously, we had a couple class features that no longer quite work, and the next one that really had a change was Mighty Rage. At 11th level, Mighty Rage previously was a free action. When you use the Rage action, that then allowed you to use any action with the Rage trait as a free action on top of it. So, since you were required to use Rage on your turn, that allowed you to start your other actions up as well at the same time, and that's not really necessary anymore since you can free action at the start of combat. So, you won't get that benefit if you were to, say, fall unconscious and come back up, but previously you likely wouldn't have really gotten to do that anyways if you lost Rage and restarted it, since you would have had to wait a minute. Instead, Mighty Rage now makes it that when you use Quick Tempered, that free action to rage at the start of initiative, the first strike you make on your first turn doubles the rage damage you deal. So your bonus to damage from rage, it deals that much as additional. And that's not a status or circumstance bonus, it is just a bonus, so it'll stack with anything else you've got going on, which is quite nice. I'm not sure how objectively good it is. I think it is just better than what we had with Mighty Rage previously, considering old Mighty Rage is now almost obsolete your action economy is effectively remaining the same as it was if you're going to use a rage action on your turn. So this is just a way to get a little bit of extra damage at the start of combat, which is kind of nice. Get a first hit on a solid enemy. And then similarly, Quick Rage is useless as a feat now. That was a 17th level feat that made it so that once your rage ended, you could use it again without having to wait 1 minute. That doesn't really work since you can rage within a minute anyways, so it has been changed slightly and is now called Revitalizing Rage. It's the exact same combat. If your rage has ended within the last minute and you rage again, you'll gain those temporary hit points once more. You only need to spend 1 full turn not in a rage. So, nice little buff, getting those temporary hit points pretty consistently, and is just a slight change now to fit the new Barbarian. Past that, all of the other proficiency buffs are about the same, and realistically, I think it all works nicely. It's nice, solid, small buffs here and there to it. Rage is better, and there's nothing objectively bad. So, let's move on to the Barbarian's instincts. Now we've got a couple things going on with that. We have a total of 6 instincts in Player Core 2, the Animal Instinct, Dragon, Fury, Giant, Spirit, and Superstition, with 3 instincts that have come out in more recent books not being included. Those are the Elemental Instinct, which came out in Howl of the Wild, as well as the Decay and Ligneous Instinct that came out in Book 2 of Wardens of Wildwood. Those and their associated feats we're not going to be going over at all, since it is assumed that those were created with the intention of working with the remastered Barbarian already. So they don't show up in the book at all, and we're not really going to go over them at all. The big change that we got to instincts is that anathema is gone. None of the instincts, aside from superstition, have any form of anathema that will cause you to lose your instinct ability until you spend a bit of time repenting for them. I don't think there's an issue with that, and superstition, I understand what it is, and we'll get to superstition, but it is much better than it was prior. So, nothing really wrong with losing those anathemas. I think I could see attaching anathema to the instincts and making it so that you, at least removing the ability, removing the concept that you lose your instinct abilities if you don't follow, or if you do something anathema to you, since with the removal of alignment in the remaster project, there has been a much heavier focus on edicts and anathema. So it does feel a little strange that all Barbarian instincts have lost anathema and don't really have any edicts alongside them. I would have liked to see something, even if it's just for flavor, to sort of guide your Barbarian's rage. So I'm a little disappointed in that, but mechanically, it's not any sort of issue. Taking a look at what we've got with them, though, starting with our Animal Instinct, it's the exact same as it was before. Nothing has changed. You get one of your instincts of choice that is going to give you an unarmed attack that is primarily a D10, some of them having a secondary attack that's a D6 or a D4. Many of these have some sort of additional trait with them. At 7th level, with your specialization, that D10 unarmed attack is going to become a D12. The other ones are going to increase as well. Nice and simple, really good for unarmed. I can see Animal Instinct making for some really solid tanking as well, since you could theoretically use a shield in one hand, and since there's no AC penalty anymore, and you've got a D10 that becomes D12 single hand unarmed attack, you really could do really well making yourself an actual tank, most hit points and high AC at the front of the party. And that ties back into, I think, a little bit of my gripe with losing that AC penalty, is that Barbarian has ways to tank just as well as more AC focused tanks, and they've got the hit points to make them even more of a nuisance to take down for enemies. So from the GM's perspective, I don't like it, but I can understand why players really like it. Moving on to the Dragon Instinct. Similarly to Animal, it's just about the same. All the numbers remain the same, your specialization remains the same, your resistance remains the same. The biggest difference is that the instincts are different. Now that we've got the new types of dragons based off of the different magical traditions, and no longer chromatic and metallic dragons to base off of, you have different options for your dragon breath damage. Taking a look at it, we are losing out on the ability to make your rage damage acid, electricity, or cold, which is a bit of a shame, but you're getting a bunch of new options, being bludgeoning, spirit, force, and mental damage for your extra rage damage, depending on the different instinct you go with. So you've got new options, including force, which that's amazing as a choice, considering how little force damage finds any sort of resistance to come against it in the game. So that's a bit crazy that you can do something like that now, but I don't really have a huge issue with it, per se. My biggest gripe ties into what Fury Instinct has. Fury has gotten a very slight damage increase on top of their instinct ability. They're still getting a bonus first level Barbarian feat, and their rage damage is increasing from 2 to 3, which goes up to 7 with their specialization ability. Personally, I am of the opinion that I wish Fury Instinct's damage was at the very least switched with Dragon Instinct. Dragon gets some really cool things, especially with the ability to change their damage type, and Fury Instinct, especially with some of its feats later on, feels like it was kind of forgotten about or left on the cutting room floor. It doesn't really have anything going for it, and it's not even the second highest damage type that you get. Losing out on that extra damage really solely for a bonus first level feat doesn't feel super duper good. So I am a little disappointed in Fury Instinct. I'm actually a lot of disappointed in it, and I don't think there'd be any issue with its damage going up, and I don't think there'd be any issue with Dragon Instinct's damage going down slightly. So I think personally switching them around just makes for a solid argument, and makes Fury Instinct a little bit more appetizing, if only for the bonus to the damage. It really makes you feel like you are truly just digging deep into your own raw strength and fury to hit enemies down. The Fury Instinct also has its raging resistance the same as it was, where you're resisting physical weapon damage, but not just physical damage from other sources. And I've never really liked that, especially at high levels when you're starting to get to that. A lot of enemies, I think you are in a majority going to fight enemies that don't have physical weapons, but still deal physical damage with claws and other unarmed attacks. And I really don't think there's any reason for the raging resistance of Fury Instinct to only be able to resist weapons. If we look at Animal Instinct again, they solely get piercing and slashing damage resistance from all sources. Spells, unarmed attacks, weapons. Raging resistance adds in bludgeoning damage on top of that to what you're getting, but limits you so heavily just to physical weapon damage. And I don't see the point for that, really. I think it is a bit disappointing. And I don't know. I almost would like Raging Resistance if it were sort of like Animal Instinct. You resist piercing and slashing, but make it so you get to choose 2 out of 3 bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing. And if you really want, make it something that you choose when you rage. Sort of like how Spirit Instinct used to work, where you got to choose between Vitality and Void damage. Make it so that when you rage, you choose 2 out of 3 of those damage types to resist. That can make Fury Instinct a little bit more enticing to go into, since that gives them a little bit of versatility in the face of whatever enemies they're facing. Giant Instinct, though, it's pretty much the same as it was. The slight difference it has is in your instinct ability. Previously, your large weapon you simply got access to, and you had to still purchase it with your starting funds. Now you actually get it for free, as long as it is something you have access to and, according to books, should be common and has a price of 9 gold or less. You get it for free on top of your starting equipment for the game, which is very, very nice. Excuse me. Just getting that for free, you're set up, you can use your money on whatever else you want. And past that, the damage buff, the clumsy effect, all still the same. The instinct is entirely the same. You're just guaranteed your large weapon for free, as written in the book at least. Spirit Instinct does have some slight differences, mainly being that Vitality and Void energies are no longer your damage choices when you rage. Now, when you rage, your damage type can be changed to Spirit and get its damage increase. And I like that. That makes a lot more sense. The idea of the Spirit Instinct is you are enormously sensitive to spirits and souls, so the damage type that actually interacts with them absolutely makes sense for it to be what you get. You do still also get your Ghost Touch property rune on there. All of that is good. That being the case, though, Raging Resistance doesn't make as much sense to me anymore. It's the exact same as it used to be. You have resistance to Void and resistance to any damage from the attacks and abilities of undead. I can understand the undead part somewhat, but the focus is on spirits and your damage type was changed to spirit damage. Why do you not get resistance to spirit damage as well? If you're so sensitive to them, it would make sense that you are probably protecting yourself a bit more against spiritual energies and attacks on your soul. So I'm a little confused as to why your Raging Resistance doesn't give you Spirit Resistance and still gives Void Resistance. That might have truly just been an oversight, but for me, I would probably personally homebrew that to make it a resistance to spirit damage over Void. Last but not least, we've got the updated Superstition Instinct, and its change is something that actually makes me quite excited to try it out. Previously, it kind of was the absolute worst possible instinct you could take, since it was effectively unplayable if there was a spellcaster in the party, since willingly letting spells be cast on you was anathema and made you lose your abilities, and it had the exact wording that if you continued to travel with someone that cast spells, that would also become anathema to you. So, as long as someone wanted to play a spellcaster, you really couldn't play Superstition Instinct and get all of its cool little benefits. So, I'm glad they've changed it. You are still restricted. It is anathema to you to either learn or cast a spell, or wield or use an item that can be activated to cast a spell specifically. And if you violate this anathema, you lose your abilities until you atone for a day. Much better than it used to be, and you can still use a lot of different magic items, just ones that have the cast a spell action you can't really use. But there are a lot of items now that the action also isn't really called cast a spell. They give the effects of a spell but aren't actually casting it, so you can still use those. The other downside you have is that while you're raging, if you willingly accept the effects of a magic spell or effect, you are frightened 1, and this frightened condition will remain at 1. It can't decrease as long as you are affected by this magic. I don't hate that at all. You are suspicious of magic, so it being cast on you from an ally, something you aren't making a save against, that is what I would consider willing, should definitely make you a little bit frightened. I think that is the absolute right choice, and there are ways to get around it, so it's not even that awful, especially for the benefits you get. The +2 status bonus to all saves against magic is really, really strong, and they changed your rage damage slightly. Instead of just increasing to 4, it now increases to 3 normally, but it will also be 4 against any creature you've witnessed casting a spell in the last hour. And on top of all of that, you're also still gaining the old effect that when you rage, on top of gaining temp HP, you're regaining that many hit points as well. once per 10 minutes you can do that. So you can't do that as frequently, but you can get a little bit of a heal from raging, which is super duper nice. Past that, your specialization and your resistance are still the same, except that your specialization follows that new change to the base instinct ability, where the damage is very slightly lower if it's against a non-spellcaster, really incentivizing you to go after magic users on the battlefield, and I really like that. Raging resistance. I know it is that you choose two associated magical traditions. I don't understand why you can't just choose two of your choice. Based off of how it is, you cannot choose arcane, or I'm sorry, you cannot choose arcane and divine together, nor can you choose occult and primal together. And that just feels kind of weird. Simply because they aren't considered associated, you can't gain resistance to those two traditions at the same time. I don't think there's a huge reason not to allow that. I'd probably allow people to choose it if they wanted to, but at the end of the day, it's not a huge issue, especially at that point in the game. So, overall, I think most of the instincts are pretty strong. I'm pretty happy with the small changes that have been made here and there. There are some changes or really non-changes that don't make a whole lot of sense to me and I would probably change. Fury Instinct, I do think, needs a bit more of a damage buff and a change to its resistance to make it actually feel like it's special compared to all of the other instincts, which get something special. Fury just kind of feels like a pebble you kick to the side of the road. Just you ignore it. And Raging Resistance from Spirit Instinct also doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. I think that should be changed to Spirit. Last but not least, I think your Dragon Instinct's damage could be lowered slightly, and it wouldn't be the end of the world. Right now it is the second highest possible damage, and you get a breadth of choice when you're creating your character on the damage type you want it to be, and can even choose something that's basically never resisted. I think that's a bit crazy and makes Dragon one of the stronger or strongest even choices still. But overall, I'm really happy with how Barbarian's looking at this point, especially with all the instincts. Aside from base Fury, I would be happy to play any of these. So let's move on to feats. And again, I'm not going to go over every single feat there is. I'm mostly going to go over what's been added and what's been changed. And I've got good news. Your first level feats are the exact same. Sudden Charge, Raging Thrower, Raging Intimidation, Acute Vision. All of those are the exact same. Nothing's been changed, nothing's been removed. So your first level choice is fine. Second level has some very slight changes. Acute Scent is really nice. It no longer has a prerequisite to it, so you can just take that whenever you want. You aren't required to either take Acute Vision or already have Dark Vision. You also now get access to Intimidating Strike as an option, previously a fire feat. Now Barbarians can take it as well. It's a 2-action strike that guarantees Frightened on a hit or Frightened 2 on a crit. Very nice to have access to. Second Wind has been changed slightly. It is something that allows you to gain the temp HP even if a minute hasn't passed. Otherwise, it's the exact same as previous Second Wind. And finally, I just want to talk briefly about Shake It Off. When I was talking about Superstition Instinct, there was the concept that you become Frightened 1 when an ally casts a spell on you effectively. And if it's an effect that is lasting, your frightened condition can't go down. But say an ally even just casts heal on you, you're still going to be frightened 1. You're going to take that penalty till the end of your turn. Shake It Off feels like a really solid option now because that is a single action to just reduce your frightened condition by 1, while at the same time potentially getting rid of a sickened condition you're being affected by. So I think if you're going to play Superstition Instinct, Shake It Off is probably the best choice you can take at second level. Really, really solid option to take now. Taking a look at our fourth level options for Barbarian. The biggest thing to talk about here is the new Scars of Steel feat. This is one of the few feats for Fury Instinct Barbarian. It is a once per day reaction when you are critically hit with an attack from an opponent that deals physical damage. And it allows you to gain resistance to the triggering attack equal to your Constitution modifier plus half your level. This feels bad. I don't really think there's a better way to say it than I just don't like this. I think it is really, really awful. It is. The damage resistance is higher than the resistance value you'll get at level 9. It requires you to be crit, and you're getting it 5 levels earlier than your raging resistance, but it can be used against any physical damage, not just physical weapon damage. So they sort of feel like they render each other moot. I almost feel like once you hit 9th level, you're probably retraining out of Scars of Steel, because the frequency with which you'll use it is so infrequent for the very slight buff it will give you. And any feat that is just getting a feature at an earlier level and you'll end up retraining out of it later, I don't think is a good idea. It is something that should either be part of your kit or just be gone in the first place. I actually would rather see this sort of baseline that either the resistance is higher or it's against any physical damage should be what you get normally for Fury Instinct, and let this be something different. I would actually really love to see this perhaps be a damage buff for your next turn, or even your first attack on your next turn after you get crit, sort of like a retaliatory strike almost. Finding a way to... It doesn't feel good right now. It feels really, really bad, and it is one of the only 2 or 3 feats specifically for Fury Instinct Barbarian. It's the only brand new one, I believe, and it's this kind of awful, and it just makes that instinct even worse to want to take. So I'm really disappointed with how Scars of Steel came out for one of the few truly new feats that the class has gotten. Moving past that, though, I also want to talk a little bit about Wounded Rage. So, Wounded Rage is a reaction. I believe it is the exact same as it was pre-remaster. If you would take damage and are capable of entering Rage, you rage as a reaction. This feels really weak now, since you can enter Rage as a free action when you roll initiative. The only time you're really going to use this is if you're unconscious, you come back up, you take damage again, you get to then rage for free. I would love to see it maybe be something different, maybe even make it if you were at 0 hit points and you return to 1 or higher hit point is the trigger, and that's immediately enter rage as a reaction. Or make it something like it's when you hit half or lower health, you instantly gain half the temp HP you would have gotten when you raged. I think as is, keeping it the same as it was, is going to make it almost never taken. Especially with supernatural senses being pretty solid, swipe being pretty solid, oversized throw, raging athlete. You've got a lot of great general 4th level options, and I think Wounded Rage, aside from Scars of Steel, is by far kind of the most useless of them. It has such niche usage that I don't think using a 4th level feat slot on it is ever going to really seem worth it. Would love to see it get reworked slightly into something different. Taking a look at 6th level, most of it's pretty good. Brutal Bully has been updated ever so slightly. It's still the exact same, except you can use it on reposition, which makes sense. I imagine most GMs were allowing that anyways with the remaster up until Player Core 2, but it is just nice. Dragon's Rage Breath. It is now only a 30-foot cone you get access to. There's no longer either a cone or line option based off of your dragon. Your dragon is only important for the tradition and damage type, and Dragon's Rage Breath will always be a 30-foot cone. I don't have any issue with that. I think it's just fine. Inner Strength. 6th level feat, single action, lets you reduce your enfeebled condition by 1. My big question is, why did they make it a spirit instinct only feat? Previously, it was just a general barbarian feat, but now it does have the prerequisite of a spirit instinct, and there's no feasible reason for it. The flavor text doesn't give any sort of description. It seems really, really strange. And my thought process at first was maybe they did it so that every sixth or every instinct had a sixth level feat, except Spirit Instinct already has a different sixth level feat. And funny enough, Fury Instinct, which is what I would think that would fit a little bit better for, doesn't have a sixth level feat. So part of me wonders if that's a typo. I think if you're going to put a prerequisite, whatchamacallit on there, it should probably just be the Fury Instinct, but it is what it is. You're probably never going to really take it compared to your other sixth level options. That's just a confusing change to me. Let's see what else we've got. Mage Hunter for Superstition Instinct has been completely reworked, and I'm really happy with this rework. Also, previously it was a reaction that let you potentially disrupt a spell. You used it when an enemy within your reach cast a spell, you hit them, and I believe even if you just regularly hit, you disrupted. Let me check here. Mage Hunter. Nope, you only disrupted it on a crit. Why would you ever take that when you can take Reactive Strike and it's the exact same thing, save for the very limited list of spells that aren't a manipulate action to take? Didn't really ever make sense. It has now been completely reworked. It is now a 2-action ability that has to only be done on a target you've seen cast a spell, and it stupefies them on a it stupefies 1 if you hit them, stupefied 2 on a crit. It's effectively Intimidating Strike that does stupefied, and it is for Superstition Instinct only. I really, really like this because you are saying, hey, I'm going to use 2 actions to hit you. At minimum, as long as I hit you, you've now got a 30% chance to waste any spells you cast on your next turn. Really nice. Really makes a lot more sense, sort of preemptively stopping them from casting more spells, focusing on disrupting their spellcasting ability. Love it. Nocturnal Senses has been nerfed ever so slightly. Previously, it just gave you dark vision. Now it only gives you dark vision if you already have low light vision. It's pretty much a debuff or like a nerf that doesn't really matter. It's just about the same. But it still feels a little bit like Nocturnal Senses makes acute vision obsolete a little bit, since I think you're going to take that a lot more frequently if you've previously taken acute sense, or acute scent, I'm sorry, since that increases your sense range to 60 feet, and if you've already got low light vision from your ancestry, it's going to give you dark vision on top of that while raging, which is what acute vision already gave you. So it is a 6th level feat that effectively makes a 1st level feat something you would retrain out of, and I don't particularly approve of that, like we've discussed earlier. Last but not least, for 6th level, Scouring Rage. It's been buffed slightly. Instead of only affecting creatures adjacent to you now, it is a 20-foot AoE when you enter Rage, and it also targets specifically enemies, not just all creatures. So your allies are going to be safe from that little bit of energy explosion if you want to do that when you enter Rage. I don't necessarily think that's going to be a frequently chosen feat, especially because 6th level is when Reactive Strike is available. You've got things like Cleave, Dragon's Rage Breath, even Brutal Bully, Animal Skin, Giant Stature, Mage Hunter. There's so many really solid 6th level options. I don't think Scouring Rage is going to be taken very frequently, but I do appreciate that it got a little bit of a buff. That I do think was a good choice on their part. Moving on to 8th level, Animalistic Brutality. Previously, Animal Rage has been completely reworked. Previously, it gave the effects of animal form and only really gave a slight buff to yourself. Now, it adds an additional trait to your unarmed attack you get from your Rage that lasts until the end of your rage, I believe. And you can choose backswing, forceful, parry, sweep, or the new raising trait that deals additional damage to objects. I really like this choice. It just feels like it is an actual benefit. You choose it, lasts until the end of the rage. You can choose a different one when you rage again next time. So it does feel like it is also giving you a bit of versatility depending on what sort of situation you're facing. I really approve of that. That's quite nice. Let me see. I've got my notes. Instinctive Strike, buffed kind of slightly. It's no longer a 2-action attack. It simply buffs your attacks against concealed and hidden creatures that you're detecting. That's very, very nice. Being more passive as opposed to requiring a 2-action attack means you can do some other 2-action attack that is going to be benefiting from it just the same, and that makes me like it. 8th level is also where we get another brand new feat for Barbarian, Invulnerable Rager. And this is one of the feats that sort of compounds on my disappointment with losing the rage penalty to AC, since Invulnerable Rager provides you scaling armor proficiency with heavy armor. It's pretty neat, especially for making a more tanky Barbarian, and I do like it. It makes it so that your quick-tempered free action to enter rage ignores the restriction that you can't be using heavy armor, and the heavy armor proficiency scales whenever your medium armor proficiency scales. I really like that. I think it's super cool. But again, it's kind of making Barbarians really, really good at being amazing tanks, and they're still getting really solid damage output on top of their abilities. So getting sort of these additional feats to make their AC tanking even higher when they're already the highest HP tanks in the game, I think is a little concerning to me, personally. If I'm going to have to deal with a champion and a barbarian at the same time, the champion's AC was already a nuisance to get through. If I have to get through barbarian stupidly high AC as well, I'm going to cry. Probably. There's a high likelihood. Or I'll just start faking my dice rolls again, and nobody wants that. Everyone just wants the bad dice rolls that are not cheated. Anyways, Renewed Vigor. That's a fun one. Increases your temp HP if you were attacked this turn. Or, I'm sorry, if you attacked this turn, as opposed to its previous version. So normally it was a single action, gain temp HP equal to half your level plus con mod. Now it does that, and if you made an attack action already this turn, it increases to your level plus con mod instead of half level plus con mod. That's just a nice way to get your temp HP back. Also, I do want to go back to Invulnerable Rager again, because as much as I'm sad about tanking Barbarians, when I think about playing one, I want to take that and all the charge feats and just make a train. Give me a giant instinct barbarian that's going to take the abilities to increase my size, give me barreling charge, sudden charge, and I'm just going to bulldoze the battlefield. And that is a sight that makes me happy to think about. So, as sad as I might be, and I might try to espouse that it's a bad idea, I really like it at the end of the day. Shared Rage. Even better now. It's going to fall into a series of feats we'll end up talking about that is made objectively better because Rage doesn't have that AC penalty anymore. So it's the same as it used to be. You give an ally within 30 feet the benefits of Rage, but they can still use Concentrate actions. It doesn't get any of your added benefits from your Instinct or feats or anything similar. But, so it's just damage bonus on their effectively melee weapons that are agile, and they don't take an AC penalty. That's all it is. It's pretty decent. I'd say it's probably still best only to like retrain into right before high level if you're going to take Contagious Rage. Simply because it's effectively one action to give an ally within 30 feet a +2 damage bonus. And I don't really know how much you think that's worth it compared to the other feats you could take at this point in time. Other big change with 8th level, Thrash has gotten a very slight wording update. Previously, the requirement was that you had an enemy grabbed. Now it's updated it so that the requirement is an enemy that is grabbed or restrained. Makes sense. I imagine most GMs always treated it as such anyway, but it was pretty weird as written that if you crit succeeded a grapple on someone and restrained them, you technically couldn't thrash them. That was very weird, and I'm glad they've updated the wording. 10th level. We're almost halfway done. Let's get through this. The high level ones are going to get a lot easier. But Determined Dash is an old feat. It has been combined with Old Furious Sprint to the new version of Furious Sprint. So previously, Determined Dash was 2 actions, make just 2 stride actions that ignored versions of difficult terrain. It also let you use athletics to balance. And Furious Dash was a way to make 2 actions to stride up to 5 times in a straight line, or 8 times if you did it as 3 actions. Those 2 have been combined slightly. You're losing out on the ability to ignore difficult terrain, but you can replace any of those stride actions with a balance action, and when you do so, you can use athletics to balance instead of acrobatics. I think it's a bit nicer. It's going to have really niche use, because again, that is a 5 stride actions in a straight line. That is best served when you've got to book it down a long hallway. Past that, it's going to be kind of niche. But I do like that they combined those 2 feats and put them together. It's pretty good. Past that, Terrifying Howl. Kind of weird. It doesn't have the prerequisite of Intimidating Glare, and it actually gives you the benefits that you don't take the penalty to demoralize creatures that don't understand your language. I like it. It feels kind of weird because it feels a little bit like it clashes with Raging Intimidation. Since Raging Intimidation is what allows you to demoralize while raging, since Demoralize has the Concentrate trait, it also grants you, I believe, Intimidating Glare and Numb to Death? Might not be Numb to Death, it might be a different one, as you level up for free. And Terrifying Howl is specifically an intimidation check to demoralize all enemies within 30 feet, getting the benefits of ignoring language differences from Intimidating Glare, and it's not actually demoralizing them, so you don't have to worry about the Concentrate trait. But it just feels like you're losing something if you take both of them that you could get instead. I'm not really sure what it is, but it just feels like they don't quite mesh as well as they could. So I'm slightly off about that. Maybe I'm just out of my mind. That's a distinct possibility. But I think I'm going to need to see it in play to make better my thoughts on it. That's a good way of saying that. Very good. 12th level. Embrace the Pain. I mean, you could consider it a debuff, technically. The trigger wording for it previously was just an enemy damages you with a melee attack. Now it is an enemy within your reach damages you with a melee attack. Led previously to some very entertaining potential arguments that if an enemy with a 15-foot reach hit you with a melee attack, you could argue that you could embrace the pain and grapple the arm that just attacked you, because it doesn't specify you have to be within reach. That's just been clarified now. Makes sense. And the only other big change to 12th level is that Spirit's Wrath has been changed. Instead of dealing Vitality or Void damage, the Wisp deals Spirit damage, just bringing it in line with the Spirit Instinct. There's nothing wrong with that. Makes it fit and makes a lot of sense. 14th level, the only real change is that your Vengeful Strike got a buff to it. It is now the exact same. It requires you to be under the effects of Come and Get Me, and triggers if a creature just hits you, lets you reaction attack them, but it has the additional wording that if the attack that hit you was a crit, you now get to Vengeful Strike as a free action instead of a reaction. So, very, very nice. If you're under the effects of Come and Get Me, which, again, lowers your AC, and I believe it makes you permanently off guard while you're raging for a damage bonus, and making enemies that hit you off guard as well, Vengeful Strike might lead to some real fun shenanigans now that, if they really do choose to focus on you, you can end up putting back multiple attacks outside of your turn simply by the fact that you get crit. I like that change. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, and I mean, you're taking crits to even make it a free action, so you're going to be taking heavier damage. I don't think there's any issue with that. I quite like it. It'll be fun to see people really get to make good use of that. And you're not going to be crit as frequently anymore, because like we've talked about, Barbarian doesn't have an AC penalty when raging anymore. 16th level, Reckless Abandon has just been entirely renamed to Desperate Wrath. And the other big difference is that the AC penalty on it has changed. So previously, it was a free action. If your turn begins and you are below half health, you'll get a +2 circumstance to damage rolls, or to attack rolls, a -2 penalty to AC, and a -1 penalty to all saves. That all remains the same, except the AC penalty is now only a -1. It makes it better, but it falls under that confusion I'm having of why are they seemingly so reluctant to let barbarians have that lower AC while they're out and about. I don't really think there's a huge issue with it having been -2, but it is just better now, so go wild with it, people. Have fun. Dragon transformation has been changed ever so slightly, making it a bit better, you could say. It does have a once per 10-minute frequency, which it did not have previously, so you are going to be limited to once per combat at best with it. But it does, when you transform now, add the temp HP from dragon form that you would get to whatever temporary hit points you might already have, whether that's from rage or some other effect. They're going to stack together, which is really nice. That's not something you really ever see elsewhere. And seeing that be an additional benefit is pretty cool. On to 18th level, Perfect Clarity. Objectively better. Because you can just begin raging again with no penalty, Perfect Clarity being the reaction when you fail or critically fail an attack or will save, you can end your rage to re-roll the triggering roll with a +2 circumstance bonus. That's a reaction, and then you can just immediately start raging again, just without temp HP, so that it's objectively better as an 18th level feat. And Whirlwind Toss, which was previously a 20th level feat, has just been moved down to an 18th level feat. I don't think there's a huge change to be noted with that. It's just kind of nice, since you can get it slightly earlier and use your capstone on something else. As for 20th level, everything is the same. You've got Annihilating Swing, you've got Contagious Rage, you've got Quaking Stomp, and you've got Unstoppable Juggernaut. The only real change you could say is that Unstoppable Juggernaut has the being made objectively better, similar to Perfect Clarity, since you can immediately start raging again after being forced to end it to remain standing. And that does it for Barbarian. That is quick going over all of the feats, the updates to proficiency and abilities. Final thoughts. I'm really happy with it. I didn't really have any problems with Barbarian pre-remaster. I always thought it was a very good class and pretty darn balanced well. I'm slightly sad that the AC penalty is gone. I know a lot of people are happy about it, so I shouldn't complain too much about it, but I don't think it was ever really such a big issue that it needed to be gotten rid of. Other than that, just about all the feats are really, really nice. I think Fury Instinct is just objectively too weak that I don't think people are ever really going to play it unless we get an errata at some point that makes it better. I think for my personal games, I will probably homebrew Fury Instinct to do a bit more damage, and I will likely figure out a way to change Scars of Steel at some point as well, because that feat just doesn't feel good. Overall, though, I love what they did with Barbarian, and I'm absolutely terrified for people to make those rebuilds in the games I've got running, because they're just going to become even more dangerous to the monsters I'm throwing at them. So, very excited to see what they do. Thank you guys so much for watching. I do so hope you enjoyed. If you've stuck around this far, not still pretty long video, the basic stuff that no one ever really likes saying, like the video, leave a comment. I know the channel's not very big right now, but I would really love to interact with you guys, especially with the new content that's coming out with the remaster. I'd really, really love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments and even spark a discussion about it. See what you guys think, what you would change, if anything, what you like and dislike. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't, please, just cause I would like to boost those numbers at some point. And I guess the next class I'm going to get started on here is the Champion, taking a look at what's going on with it and getting that video out to you guys pretty soon. So, I will see you guys pretty soon. Have a good one and enjoy your gaming.